The rain had been falling for 3 days straight, turning the sidewalks of downtown Seattle into rivers of gray water that reflected the neon signs above. Most people hurried past with umbrellas tilted against the wind, their eyes fixed on the ground, avoiding eye contact with anyone who might slow their pace. But not everyone had somewhere warm to go. On the corner of 5th and Pine, beneath the green awning of an abandoned storefront, sat a woman whose name most people never bothered to ask. Her clothes were layered and mismatched, her hair hidden beneath a faded blue scarf that had once been bright. Her hands, rough and reddened from the cold, clutched a torn piece of cardboard that read simply, "Anything helps. God bless." Her name was Margaret Rose Sullivan, though she had not heard anyone call her by her full name in nearly 4 years. To the world, she was invisible, just another face in the crowd of forgotten people who lined the streets when the sun went down. But Margaret had not always been homeless. She had once been a nurse, a good one, who worked the night shift at Mercy General Hospital. She had a small apartment with plants on the windowsill and a cat named Oliver. She had friends who called her Maggie and a routine that made sense. Then her mother got sick. The bills piled up faster than Margaret could manage. She took out loans, maxed out credit cards, borrowed from friends who slowly stopped answering her calls. When her mother passed away, Margaret was left with nothing but debt and a grief so heavy it pulled her under. She lost the apartment first, then the job, then the will to keep trying. Now, for years later, she sat on cold concrete and watched the world move past her like she was a ghost. That particular Thursday evening, as the rain finally began to ease, a black SUV pulled up to the curb just a few feet from where Margaret sat. The engine idled for a moment, steam rising from the hood, and then the back door opened. A little girl, no more than 6 years old, stepped out onto the wet pavement. She wore a bright yellow raincoat with a hood trimmed in white fur, and her boots were shaped like ducks. Her eyes, wide and curious, scanned the street until they landed on Margaret. The girl walked toward her without hesitation, her small hand reaching into the pocket of her coat. Margaret looked up, startled, as the child stopped directly in front of her and held out a folded $20 bill. "My mom says you look cold," the girl said softly. Her voice was gentle, without pity, just matter-of-fact kindness. Margaret blinked, unsure how to respond. Before she could say anything, a woman emerged from the SUV, her heels clicking against the pavement as she hurried over. She was elegant, dressed in a long cream-colored coat with her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her expression was calm but watchful, like she was used to managing situations with grace. "Emma, sweetheart, you can't just run off like that," the woman said, though her tone was more affectionate than scolding. Then she turned to Margaret and smiled, a real smile, not the forced kind people sometimes gave out of obligation. "I'm sorry if she startled you. She has a very big heart and not much sense of boundaries yet." Margaret finally found her voice. "No, it's okay. She's very kind. Thank you." The woman knelt down beside her daughter and gently took the $20 bill, then reached into her own purse and pulled out a $50. "Here," she said, handing it to Margaret. "Please take it. And if you're hungry, there's a diner 2 blocks down. Tell them Claire sent you. They'll take care of you." Margaret stared at the money in her hand, then back at the woman. "I don't know what to say." Claire stood and placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "You don't have to say anything. Just stay warm tonight, okay?" They turned to leave, but Emma looked back one more time. "What's your name?" she asked. Margaret hesitated, then answered quietly. "Maggie." Emma smiled. "I'm Emma. And that's my mom, Claire. We'll remember you, Maggie." As the SUV pulled away, Margaret sat there holding the $50 bill like it was something fragile and precious. For the first time in months, she felt something shift inside her chest, something small but undeniable. Oh, that night she did go to the diner. She ordered soup and coffee and sat in a booth by the window, watching the rain start up again. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes, brought her extra bread without asking. When Margaret tried to pay, the waitress shook her head. "Claire already called. Your meal's covered, honey. You just take care of yourself." Margaret ate slowly, savoring every bite, and when she finally left, she walked a little taller. She did not know it yet, but that moment on the sidewalk, that brief encounter with a little girl in a yellow raincoat and her mother who saw her as a person, not a problem, was the beginning of something much bigger. Because Claire Montgomery was not just a kind stranger. She was the founder of a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping women escape homelessness, and she had been looking for someone to tell a story that mattered, a story that could change hearts and open doors. Margaret Rose Sullivan, the invisible woman on the corner of 5th and Pine, was about to become the center of that story. And her life, as she had known it, was never going to be the same. 3 weeks after that rainy evening, Margaret found herself standing in front of a tall brick building on the edge of the city, clutching a small piece of paper with an address written in Claire's handwriting. The building was old but well maintained, with large windows and a wooden sign that read, "New Beginnings Women's Shelter." Her heart pounded as she climbed the front steps, unsure of what to expect. Claire had found her again, this time with an offer that felt too good to be true. "We have a bed for you," Claire had said when she returned to the corner where they first met. "And not just a bed, Maggie. A program. A chance to rebuild." Margaret had wanted to say no. She had learned not to trust promises, not to hope too much, because hope hurt when it was taken away. But something in Claire's eyes made her believe, just a little, that maybe this time could be different. Inside the shelter, the air smelled like fresh laundry and something baking in the kitchen. A woman at the front desk greeted her warmly and led her down a hallway lined with photographs of smiling women, each one holding a certificate or standing in front of a new apartment. "These are our graduates," the woman explained. "Women who came here with nothing and left with everything they needed to start over." Margaret stopped in front of one photo, a woman with short gray hair and a wide grin, holding a set of keys. "Where is she now?" Margaret asked. "She manages a small bookstore downtown. Been there 2 years now. Doing great." They continued down the hall until they reached a small room with a single bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out onto a garden. It was simple, but it was clean, and it was hers. "You'll start tomorrow," the woman said. "Counseling, job training, financial planning. We'll walk with you every step of the way." That night, Margaret lay in bed staring at the ceiling, tears streaming down her face. She had forgotten what it felt like to sleep somewhere safe, to close her eyes without fear. The next morning, she met with Claire in a small office on the second floor. Claire sat across from her with a folder in her hands, her expression serious but kind. "I want to be honest with you, Maggie," Claire began. "This isn't going to be easy. Rebuilding takes time, effort, and a lot of courage. But I believe you have all of that inside you, even if you can't see it yet." Margaret nodded, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Why me? Why did you come back?" Claire leaned forward slightly. "Because when Emma gave you that money, you looked at her like she had given you the world. Not because of the amount, but because someone saw you. That told me everything I needed to know about who you are." Over the following months, Margaret threw herself into the program. She attended group therapy sessions where she learned she was not alone, that other women had walked similar paths and found their way back. She took classes on budgeting and resume building. She practiced interview skills until her voice no longer shook when she spoke about her experience. And slowly, piece by piece, she began to remember who she used to be. Claire checked in regularly, sometimes bringing Emma along. The little girl would sit beside Margaret and color pictures or tell stories about school. Emma never asked prying questions or treated Margaret like she was broken. She just treated her like a friend. One afternoon, as they sat together in the shelter's garden, Emma looked up from her drawing and asked, "Maggie, what do you want to be when you grow up?" Margaret laughed softly. "I think I'm already grown up, sweetheart." Emma shook her head seriously. "No, I mean, what do you want to do next?" "My mom says everyone gets to start over if they want to." Margaret thought about it for a long time. Finally, she answered, "I used to be a nurse. I love taking care of people. Maybe I could do that again someday." Emma beamed. "You should. You'd be the best nurse ever." That conversation stayed with Margaret. A few weeks later, she approached Claire with a question that scared her to ask. "Do you think it's possible for me to go back to nursing?" Claire did not hesitate. "Yes, it's absolutely possible. And I'll help you figure out how." Together, they researched certification renewal programs and scholarship opportunities. Claire connected Margaret with a nursing director at a local clinic who was willing to offer mentorship. It was a long road, but for the first time in years, Margaret had a goal that felt real. By the end of the year, Margaret had moved into her own small apartment, furnished with donations and a few pieces she had saved up to buy herself. She had a part-time job at a grocery store while she completed her nursing recertification. And every Sunday she volunteered at the shelter where she had once been a resident, helping new women find their footing the way she had. Claire invited her to speak at a fundraising event, and though Margaret was terrified, she stood in front of a room full of strangers and told her story. She spoke about loss and survival, about the people who walked past and the ones who stopped. She spoke about Emma in her yellow raincoat and the $50 bill that had felt like a lifeline. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment before the applause began. Afterward, several people approached her, some with tears in their eyes, others with donations they wanted to make. But the moment that mattered most was when Emma ran up to her and wrapped her arms around her waist. "I told my mom you were special," Emma whispered. Margaret knelt down and hugged her back. "You're the special one, sweetheart. You reminded me that I still mattered." 2 years after that first encounter on a rainy Seattle sidewalk, Margaret Rose Sullivan stood in front of a full-length mirror adjusting the collar of her brand new scrubs. They were navy blue with her name embroidered on the chest pocket, and beneath it, the word that filled her with more pride than she could express: registered nurse. She had passed her exams. She had completed her clinical hours. She had been hired at the very hospital where she used to work, Mercy General, and though many of the faces had changed, a few old colleagues still remembered her and welcomed her back with open arms. Her supervisor, a woman named Dr. Patel, had pulled her aside on her first day and said something Margaret would never forget. "We don't care where you've been, Maggie. We care where you're going. And we're glad you're here." Margaret worked the night shift again, the same shift she had loved before everything fell apart. She moved through the halls with quiet confidence, checking vitals, comforting patients, administering medication with steady hands. She was good at this. She had always been good at this. And now she had the chance to prove it again. One evening, as she finished her rounds, she received a text from Claire. "Can you meet me tomorrow afternoon? There's something I want to show you." The next day, Margaret arrived at an address Claire had sent, a newly renovated building in a neighborhood that had been neglected for years. Claire was waiting outside with Emma, who was now 8 years old and still wore her yellow raincoat even though it was getting a little small. "What is this place?" Margaret asked as they walked toward the entrance. Claire smiled. "This is the Margaret Rose Center. It's a medical clinic specifically for women experiencing homelessness. Free healthcare, mental health services, addiction support, everything they need." Margaret stopped walking. "You named it after me?" Claire nodded. "You inspired it, Maggie. Your story reminded people that everyone deserves a second chance, and that healthcare shouldn't be a privilege. We raised enough money to open this